Audra, you're in charge today. Why don't you get us started and yeah, kick it off. Let's have some fun.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for joining our Small Business Innovation Happy Hour. My name is Audra McIntosh. I serve as a business advisor in the Goldman Sachs 10K SB program in our tri-state area, so Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And happy to every week be joined by Jonathan Craybill, who is the interim program chair for the business department at Columbus State Community College, as well as our lead faculty for the Goldman Sachs program. So John is a staple in that program and ushers us through from an academic perspective for that program. So John, I'll give you a quick minute and then I'll introduce Dan. So anything else you want to share with us about yourself, John?
No, you did a better introduction than I ever could, so keep going.
So our innovation happy hours are really geared around creating a community of small business owners and helping each other work through various issues that we have today or things that we can learn from each other. And we really tend to focus on, either a particular issue or a particular company. And today we have guest Dan O'Keefe with us, who just finished our Cincinnati Goldman Sachs cohort. So we're super pleased to have Dan join us today with O'Keefe Public Relations. So Dan, I'll give you some time to introduce yourself, and then we can just set out to have a very informal conversation around innovation. And Dan's going to share with us how he has innovated throughout this pandemic crisis.
Well, thank you, Audra. Yeah, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you for having me today. I did just finish the Cincinnati's first cohort, which was exciting. Certainly COVID added to that element of excitement. I run O'Keefe PR and Marketing Solutions. We are a digital targeted public relations and content marketing agency focused on creating content that connects through all the right channels to all the right audiences using all the right content to hopefully drive conversion and sales opportunities. We've been in business almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. We've continued to grow over the years, usually at about a 20% clip. We doubled our business in 2018, and one of the reasons I joined Goldman Sachs was trying to figure out how to continue that growth. And I think the subject of today's conversation is found myself in the situation where I had to quickly pivot when the coronavirus became a pandemic that was impacting my industry and my geographic location, and started a new business while running my current business amidst a global pandemic.
So Dan, tell us a little bit, start from the beginning, at least what's happened with your business throughout the last 20 years in terms of kind of just an evolution of the business and how you have grown. 20%, I think, would be ideal for any small business to have that type of growth, but share with us a little bit about what your journey's been like as a small business owner.
Sure. Well, like all great entrepreneurs, I started by getting fired from my day job. And that was the dot-com bust, the dot-com boom that quickly became the dot-com bust. Actually, it was kind of funny. We had just secured our first PR client. We were a web design agency, and I was their marketing director, and we were trying to elevate to a more full scope creative agency. We just had secured our first PR client, and boom, 2 Fridays later, my boss was let go, and I and half the company were let go on that following Monday. But my founder, that same day, I asked him, "What are you going to do about that PR client?" And he's like, "Take it. We don't know what we're doing." So that client sustained me for my first 2 months on a freelance basis while I, grew my business and continued to attract more clients. And then a few months later, I decided, hey, I'll just make a go of it, and kept doing that. And we grew about 20% a year. And I think it was 07 or 06, one of the two, we grew about 40%. And then my biggest client at the time was a home builder here in greater Cincinnati. The housing crisis preceded the financial crisis. And when they left me, and then my second largest, they were my largest client. My second largest client was a student lender for the state of Ohio, a nonprofit student lender. That industry, literally with the stroke of a pen overnight, was gone. And then the financial crisis hit, and my third largest client just quit spending money. So a third to half of my business was gone within a year. So I tried to pivot at that point, try to become more full service. That didn't feel comfortable to me. We tried that for about 6 months and just wasn't working. So I went back to what I decided, we're going to focus on what we do best and only that, and bring that to bear for any industry that needs it. And that worked for me. That worked. I just focused on what I was comfortable doing, and I stopped taking the brochures. I stopped taking the websites, and I would just either farm that out or bring in partners to do that for me. And then my next pivot happened. I'm trying to think what happened. Oh, when Google changed their algorithm, which was, I think, right before, maybe around 2009, 2010. So around that same time that everyone else was struggling, myself included, with the financial crisis, Google decided to change their algorithm around how they weighted content. All the SEO companies were calling for the death of PR. They thought this was going to be a boon for them. Well, it was the exact opposite. Google put more weight on authentic content rather than a lot of the back pages that were being created, which was just gobbledygook for the bots and whatnot to find. And basically every news release that we created, every story that we generated for our clients was weighted more heavily because it was authentic, third-party or user-generated content. So all of a sudden, public relations, which used to be the redheaded stepchild of the marketing world, we were the ones that invited first to the party, and then we would invite everyone else to join us and partner with us. So I've had to pivot a few times over the last 19 years. And most recently what happened was we actually, early last year, and by the way, I want to introduce a couple people who have joined the call. Rick Hackman, who is a former regulatory and technical external relations manager for Procter & Gamble North America, is on the call, as is Lawrence Jones, co-partner and CEO of Riskversity, which is a risk management consulting firm here in Cincinnati, but they work certainly well beyond our borders. And he is also co-founder of Resurgence Collaborative, which was the pivot that I'm going to talk about here momentarily. But what happened was I think it was early 2019, Rick approached me and said he was getting ready to retire from Procter & Gamble in June of 2019, and wanted to continue consulting, and asked if he could do that under the O'Keefe umbrella rather than starting his own consulting company. And I said, absolutely. He's a consummate professional and a good friend who really, his job was, and Rick can dive in here if he's able to correct anything I say, but his job was to communicate and work with the various regulatory parties, legal parties around any challenges that any of the Procter & Gamble brands might have been having, and also to communicate to the Procter & Gamble audience any changes that were occurring within Procter & Gamble that he controlled that they needed to know about. The product, the brand or two that you might be most familiar with would be Tide Pods and the Tide Pod Challenge, which was voted in 2018 based on my research as one of the best managed crises of 2018. One of the top 5 best managed crises of 2018. Well, that was Rick Hackman. He did all that. He turned the tide for that brand. Excuse the pun.
No.
Exactly. And then another one might be Pampers Dry Max. So Rick approached me about wanting to come on board. I said, absolutely. That only elevates what we already do on the crisis communications front. And we established O'Keefe PR Brand Steward Services as that business line. Our plan was to launch that the middle of March of this year, and then COVID hit. So we put that on the back burner for a couple of weeks, and then early April came around, and I thought, well, this is actually a service that many companies could use in this, because that's what we do, is messaging. And we were already being asked by our current clients to help them message their procedures and their current operating approach in COVID. So we went ahead and launched that product line, and it started with I sent a pitch to our local business journal on a Friday, which is normally not what I recommend to a client, but it was the only day I had free. So I sent them a pitch that morning, and I got a response 6 minutes later from that particular reporter. And later that afternoon, we had a story online, and it got picked up by Yahoo and a couple other entities. And Rick called me, and again, Rick, feel free to chime in if I'm not remembering this correctly. But Rick called me, very excited, to say, "Hey Dan, my former coworker at Procter & Gamble had also mentioned that she was interested in consulting." I'm like, "Well, who's your former coworker?" He said, "Well, she's the former global medical director for Procter & Gamble." I was like, "Well, yes, let's have a conversation." So, and that is Dr. Cheryl Christensen. I'm not sure if she's on the call or not, but I had a conversation. We agreed it made great sense for them to join. And then it dawned on me probably that Monday or Tuesday, we were already a partner with Riskversity. We had just launched a very well-received workshop in January of this year regarding crisis management and crisis communications. It was very well received, and it dawned on me that Monday or Tuesday that, Riskversity would be a great partner for what we can do around COVID and similar business disruptions. So, in other words, how do we make this more than just O'Keefe brand steward services? It has legs longer than that, and we can deliver value to those in need right now who are either in crisis or perceive themselves as being in crisis because of COVID. So I reached out to Lawrence. I think he saw the opportunity, and we then decided we're also missing finance and legal. So we brought on a legal partner, which is my longest running client, and a finance partner, which is a company that Lawrence used to work for and is still partners with. So we now have 4 partner companies in what we then branded Resurgence Collaborative. And we are in the midst of launching that. The website is live. We just launched a blog page that we are starting to populate. We just started today our LinkedIn strategy. So both Lawrence and I, while running our own respective businesses, are also focused on launching this service focused on not just COVID, but how to recover from business disruptions and crises, and then how to prepare for future resilience following those disruptions and crises. And of course, COVID-19 is the one global crisis that we're all in the midst of right now. So that, and I can expand on that, but that's kind of the story.
So John?
Yeah, I'd actually like to ask a question, and it's not necessarily about the progression of businesses, but you mentioned pivots several times in there, and you also talked about the time period we are now, where businesses have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
How are you in the process of pivoting? Is there an emotion tied to it for you? Is it strictly based on numbers? What's your process there?
Well, I've learned over the years, and I'm the only person in my family to ever start a business, right? I was not raised by a business owner or entrepreneurs by any means. So I've learned over the years, though, that you have to approach challenges as opportunities. You have to look for the opportunities that arise from challenges, and we are in the midst of one of the largest challenges any of us, alive have ever witnessed or been a part of. And in addition to that, my priorities are making sure that I can still pay the mortgage and that my family has food on the table, but also that the families of my employees can continue to strive amidst this current pandemic. So not knowing how COVID might impact my existing business, unfortunately, we've been pretty solid. We lost one small client, but actually brought on another client to replace them in the last several weeks. And have our largest client is actually a retail grocer. So they're what's the word? They're necessary, in this pandemic, which is keeping us busy as well. Nevertheless, I can't read the future, and I wanted to do what I could to prepare should the pandemic impact my employees and me negatively. And that's why I started to think about, okay, what can I do right now, given the fact that we have to work virtually, given all the constraints, what are the opportunities? And it dawned on me, well, we are storytellers. We are messengers. We craft stories and messages for our clients. And we're already being asked by those clients to, whether it's crafting a message for their homepage on their website about how they're dealing with COVID, or crafting stories for the media about what they are doing in the midst of this pandemic. It dawned on me, we can make that a part of our core offering, and we need to communicate that. And of course, as I already mentioned, that led me to realize there's so many other components to preparing for recovery than just communications. There's the global aspect of it, there's the HR aspect of it, the finance, the legal, the cybersecurity aspect of it. As we all adapt to this virtual world in which we're now living, and how to communicate and conduct business via Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Uber Conference or Google or whatever. With that adjustment come huge, not just opportunities, but huge challenges and threats to our businesses, cybersecurity among them, right? We have the expert within Riskversity's roster on cybersecurity, not just from business, but from the military, to be able to share best practices and create best practices on the fly for organizations and businesses that need them.
Hey,
So
Dan.
did I answer your question?
Hey, Dan, take us back. So as you pivoted through each of those pivots that you indicated, talk about how things did or didn't change where your employees were concerned. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we see with small businesses, from questions around, do I have the right people on the bus, to how do I get them motivated, to what do I do now in this COVID period, and feeling like I have to take care of my employees. Talk about that piece of it for us, for your business.
Sure. So, and not every pivot is successful, by the way. So I will talk about that here too. But I can remember back when back during the financial crisis, which was also for me a housing crisis, and even the whole Google thing I mentioned. Where we try to be full service. That was an act out of, I'll admit it, out of desperation. All of, in the space of a few days almost, I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I had to think quickly. Okay, what do we need to do to adjust to this new reality? And I thought incorporating other services into our mix might be the answer. Well, yes, that's great, but I didn't necessarily have the revenue to go hire a bunch of new people to do that. I was trying to force that change on my current employee base, and they weren't comfortable with that. And I, kudos to them for voicing that. They could have just grinned and bared it, but they expressed that, we don't do this, and we don't feel comfortable doing this, or not sure how to go about adjusting to this in time. And so I that's part of the reason why within, several months after that, I decided, this is not within our comfort zone. We're not going to do this. I have to find another way, a better way to pivot. Right. Now, fast forward several years, we made the conscious decision to be more than just a public relations agency. We wanted to really embrace that content marketing component of what we're already doing, but expand on it. And that was very successful. We hired I hired one person in particular who really helped us get there, right? To the extent that within my skill sets and within my level of expertise, I could, whether she stayed or left, I could take that ball and run with it myself and grow the business, with or without that person. And then a couple years after that, I realized I was watching the growth of digital marketing agencies after they had adjusted to the whole SEO, pivot that Google did. They were finding great success with that digital/content marketing play. And I wanted to adapt to that and make digital more a component of what we do as a content marketing and PR agency. Not be a digital marketing agency, but make digital more of a component of what we do. And I hired someone to do that, and they were getting us on a really good track, and we were moving steadily, not quickly, but steadily in that direction for about 2 years. And then that person left for a different role entirely, not even in the agency world. But unfortunately, I was relying on that person for that component of the business. And when that person was no longer there, that component was no longer there. And no one else within the business could do what she was doing. So we had to, frankly, kind of, adjust back to our core businesses of PR and content marketing, So I didn't want to retract, but we had to out of necessity. That worked for us. That worked. And one thing that's always been a constant and has never changed is the importance of content, the importance of good storytelling. It's become that whole we tell a story, or that storytelling component to your branding and your tagline and whatnot has become a bit cliche, I have to admit. But the fundamental need to tell a good story amidst all the competition that we all encounter, regardless of our industries, has never faltered. If anything, it's only grown as a constant. So we're still within our sweet spot, and if anything, this most recent pivot with Resurgence Collaborative is just another way for us to tell a story that addresses the current crisis and pandemic that we're in a way that continues to help not just us, but our clients differentiate themselves.
So I think you bring up a good point. One of the things that we talked a lot about, as Dan, and Rhea Walden has just joined us not too long ago. So Rhea, welcome you.
Our advisor, hey Rhea.
Yeah, and Catherine too from our Cincinnati cohort. But as you all know that have been through the program, we talk a lot about when looking at a new opportunity for your business is looking at it from a standpoint of does it complement your current competitive advantage?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So sounds like you had to keep kind of coming back to what your competitive advantage really was in the marketplace.
Correct. I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm very limited as to what I know and what I can do. So I have to do the best I can with what I have, and I know plenty of serial entrepreneurs who have, a half dozen businesses, many of which have nothing to do with each other, and I've worked for companies like that. And I admire them and envy their ability to continually make money and create businesses out of scratch or acquire businesses that seemingly have no connection to each other and still be profitable and be successful. For me, I guess I could go off and, buy an investment property or something and make money off of rentals, which I've tried to do, but that becomes a distraction. For me, it's much easier for me to start another business or to make a pivot or an adjustment with my current business if it lines up with what I already know and do well, and I'm too easily distracted. I probably have ADD, and so I just that's the best way for me to focus is stick to what I do, in what I know. Don't stray from that, or if I stray from that, make it a very, slight stray, and make sure it somehow along the way comes back onto the main path that I'm walking.
Great. John?
Yeah. So, following along that line, if you like to keep yourself focused, my guess is that you like planning and forecasting out into the future. What were your goals? What were your forecasts for 2020 before March?
Well, John, actually, I hate forecasting and I hate planning. Right? That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons I joined Goldman Sachs, was I wanted to get better at that, and it definitely helped me in that regard, especially the money and metrics component to the course. Better understanding my profit margin and my balance sheet versus my cash basis and accrual basis, cash flow, and accounting projections and forecasting and all that. That was very helpful. Of course, that all went like poof out the window as soon as COVID hit, and I had to refocus on. But I'll get back to all that. I'll be able to go back to those learnings and incorporate them into my business more fully once we feel like we're back on track 100%. But I may have lost your question. But for me, as a business, I always have from day one. I hired a good accountant, right? I've got a financial planner that helps me focus on those things that I do not do well. So if anything, my planning and forecasting is dependent upon having the right people in place to support those functions of the business. Which again is a comfort zone for me, and another reason why I felt that creating Resurgence Collaborative was a good move for me, because with Rick and Cheryl and Lawrence and his team on board, they cover those bases that I can't possibly cover, right? And Lawrence would probably tell you the same thing. He's good at keeping those players in play, but he's not the crisis, or I'm sorry, he's not the crisis communications person. He's the crisis management person. He's not the cybersecurity person, but he understands how cybersecurity and IT audits and compliance fit into the overall mix. And so that allows us to plan. And we've not quite started forecasting for this business yet, but we're certainly planning for it. And for me, my portion of that, comes down to, all right, what's the marketing plan? What's the go-to-market plan? What's the, how do we prepare as we go to market at a time when businesses are returning to work, when you're seeing all these reports of people socializing without wearing the masks and without the proper social distancing, when we're already seeing that once the 90-degree days of summer hit, a lot of that's going to go out the window, because people are at the pools and they're thinking that the heat will kill the bug and all of that. We're going to market right when all that's happening. So we're having to think strategically about how do we make the message compelling to remind folks that this isn't over, right? It's just getting started. And let's not forget that in 6 months from now, when we're all back to work, that's when the medical experts are expecting COVID to have a resurgence, So that is our planning right now, or part of our planning is how do we message that cohesively to resonate with the organizations we're trying to attract.
So this could actually be answered by Dan or Lawrence or Rick as well. What does your communication look like right now? What does your decision making look like when you've brought a new team together within the past 2 months?
Lawrence, you want to take that since you're on?
I missed that last part.
Yeah, so I'm interested in what does the communication between Resurgent Collaborative look like, and all these different players with all the different skill sets. When you've put it together really quickly, you may all have different decision making strategies or systems that you use. I'm just interested about how you guys have put this together from a communication standpoint.
Well, I think for us, we're to Dan's earlier point, we're all doing what we've all been doing anyway. We're just kind of doing it together, and so trying to weave in to the conversation with our existing clients and prospects that we all know this is a need for them. Trying to weave that, taking and adding on the communications component, which we know Riskversity didn't have, before, or leveraging, Dr. Cheryl's or Rick's skill sets into the conversation to beef up what we've already been doing. And then just labeling some of that for a target audience as Resurgent Collaborative versus, Riskversity or, OQBPR, in communications. Did I answer that for you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawrence.
And John, I'll add that even though we can't get together as four companies, keep in mind it's actually, I think it's easier. And Lawrence and Rick, you can disagree if so, but I actually think it's easier for us to come together and brainstorm and plan because we can do it now virtually via Zoom, which is what we've been using, rather than trying to get together in person. I mean, for one, our legal member of the collaborative is based in Dayton, and the two partners involved are in Dayton, which is an hour north of us here in Cincinnati. So that would be really hard to do, or much more challenging to do. So actually, if anything, I think planning has been a little bit easier for us now that we can do it via video conference, phone, and email.
So, hey, Dan, I'm going to ask you one last question, and actually after Dan answers, anybody's welcome to jump in and answer this from your perspective as well. And also we'll open it up for questions or just kind of ongoing discussion here. But, I read an interesting article just recently through McKinsey and Company that talked about through cycle performers do things very differently and that they protect innovation, which I thought was interesting, particularly through different cycles of business. And so I'm wondering for you, and then certainly open it up to anyone else who would like to answer, what has been your perspective of innovation as the evolution of your company, and even today, how do you see that, and do you see it differently?
I mean, well, crisis spawns innovation. I truly believe that. I certainly, you could call it a cliche, but I think there's a lot of reality to that. We are participating in one of those innovations right now. Not the video conference didn't exist before, but the fact is, the way we collaborate, the way we work, will be changed forever, even after a vaccine is invented and makes its way via distribution and we're all vaccinated. I'm already seeing both challenges and opportunities because of this. Video conferencing is going to make it easier for people to work from home, those who enjoy it, right? Mm-hmm. And I would not want to be in commercial real estate right now. That's going to be a challenge moving forward, right? When I already know that I've talked to friends of mine who work for larger companies that are already saying they're going to let their leases run out, because their teams are becoming very productive at working from home because they've been forced to do it now for 2 months. So that's both a challenge and an innovation. I think the way that we're going to go back to work with let's just say social distancing. I think masks eventually will probably, and Rick should respond to this if he disagrees. But I think once a vaccine makes its way to all of us, I think masks might go out the window until the next pandemic. But I think the preparedness that we all will need to continually observe when working with others is going to be here for a long time to come. And I think that idea of social distancing and yet still being able to collaborate is going to spawn additional innovation moving forward. I don't know what that might look like, mm-hmm. But the idea that no longer might it be safe to sit right next to someone in a conference room. How do we collaborate while still being interpersonal, but yet protecting ourselves from each other? We're already seeing it with airlines, and all the mock-ups that you can see for how they're adjusting the seating, with the plexiglass, dividers and yada, yada, yada. But they still have to make money. So how are they going to make that affordable? How are they going to make that practical, but yet also affordable for consumers to fly? That's going to be challenging.
Right.
So I think innovation is in the world of medical devices and healthcare. We're going to see tons of innovation come out of all of this. As communicators, I just think it's going to be about technology. I mean, the message, the act of communicating and messaging and writing, I can't see how that's going to innovate too terribly much right now, because the act hasn't changed. I'm still on my laptop doing what I've always done. I'm still emailing and distributing and sharing information the way I've always done, whether it's with traditional media or with clients or with all of you. That hasn't changed too terribly much, which again is another reason why I think, we in our industry, or at least in my business and a lot of the peers I've talked to, are surviving amidst this pandemic fairly well. I'm not going to
Okay.
say it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Good insight.
Could I put somebody on the spot here real quick?
Sure.
Okay, Jennifer, I wanted to come to you, and I want to apologize for putting you on the spot. But you said you were in construction management, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what does your answer to that question look like when it comes to innovation, especially when hold on a second. Dogs in the background. Especially when you look at the demographics of who works in the construction industry. I have friends that live in Cleveland that work at an excavation firm that's been there for, I don't know, 60 years, something like that. And you see the demographics of that older generation getting ready to retire. That business has always been done a certain way. Mm-hmm. So what does this innovation look like in a construction type of industry?
I find it very difficult to find an innovative way to approach construction because it's so traditional, so regulated, and so steadfast in what's going on. And during this pandemic, it's been extremely difficult because those projects that are private projects that are already in progress are going on fine and smoothly. But because of the pandemic, if you're doing any type of state contracting work, which is the majority of the business that I do right now, it's become a big issue because the governor has reduced all of the budgets for all of the departments by 20%. And as a result of that, the first thing that's going is renovations or updates of electrical, things like that. So that's become a big problem for us. And we were very innovative earlier in the construction industry, which would be my, for lack of a better term, since you guys are using it, pivot, was when we took our industry of construction management and turned it into a third-party administration focus, in which we now, instead of physically going out and doing the work, we now act on behalf of the agency or the client or the library or whoever it is, and we actually run their projects for them as project managers, because in many of these instances, those clients do not have the ability or the manpower to actually run projects. And so we can get them done faster, more efficiently, and more cost effectively for them. So that's kind of the innovative side for us. But right now, I can't even tell you what we're going to do because we've lost 50% of our business as a result of COVID. So that answers your question.
If I may, John and Jennifer. So Jennifer, my wife does exactly that. She's a senior leadership for a construction company here in Cincinnati, and they are a project manager. They don't have their own construction workers, but they've got a management team. And yeah, I would say she'd probably nod her head and agree with everything you just said. And there are challenges right now for construction. Although there are plenty of projects out there still, they're still getting requests for proposals and whatnot. It's just more competitive, and there are challenges about how you deal with job sites because of the pandemic, and it's a lot of employee issues or workforce issues with that, I would say. But yeah, the innovation is less about technology, probably more about how do you adjust to the new world.
Well, exactly, and nobody wants. And you do have a big issue with people that are afraid to go to the job sites. I mean, we have contractors that are saying we're not going until COVID's over. And we're like, well, that may be forever. I mean, COVID may never be over. It may be over in 2 weeks or maybe over in a year. We really don't know. So we have to find substitutions. We have to find other people that go in and finish the job because we are essential personnel. We haven't shut down. I'm at my office right now. I mean, this is just how it's been for the past 3 months. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. Coming up with innovative ideas is thinking outside the box. And we're actually now out marketing to our clients of ways to help them with the COVID and go in and supply them with the plexiglass dividers, or how are they going to go about getting the books back in the library so that they can get them cleaned and sterilized and all that before it goes to the next person. So there's a lot of factors and a lot of ways that we're looking at it, but it's a lot to come up with, and you have to come up with the ways to be able to support it and pay for it, and what the cost is going to be, the cost structure, to be able to make those offers to them. So there's a lot of questions right now, and we had to lay off people, and we had to furlough people and reduce hours. So it's been difficult, and yeah, coming up with innovative ideas is hard.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think you're right about that, Jennifer. I think that's what people find difficult, but I think one of the things that they say that where small businesses really succeed are those that really kind of commit to long-term growth and thinking about those innovations at all times. I mean, we don't ever know what we're going to get hit with, right? Mm-hmm. So we just kind of keep moving in the long-term growth direction and finding ways to grow. Let me open it up to everybody else. It's 3:46 and we typically run this call until 4 o'clock. I want to open it up for questions or anything anybody else would like to share with us today or provide any insight on.
So I would want to touch base to Jennifer and go back to something that Dan said in terms of innovation in the construction industry. One of the clients that I've worked with is, I might get this wrong. I think he's like a construction manager, for lack of a better word. And because he hasn't been able to technically go out there on the job site and do some of the things they do because of what was going on with COVID, he actually sent his crew out with cameras. And so they basically used the camera for the inspections and the sites and to be able to look and see what the project looks like and what's going on. And it's worked for him on the one hand, but not so much on the other hand for the really nitty gritty, deep, got to get in the trenches kind of stuff. So on one level that the innovation is there, but on the other level, the technology isn't available for the innovation to allow him to do a deeper dive in it. So it's interesting to see how he pivoted on that, because now he's making that a component of his business to do it for other people. So that to me was like, well, gosh, wonder why they didn't do that before.
It's a great idea, and actually they're doing that. A lot of the RFPs that are coming out now, instead of doing a hands-on site visit where you actually go to the site and walk through it, they're doing a virtual site visit. Mm-hmm. But it's exactly the problem that Ray was saying, is that you can't see the unknowns that you would be able to see with your naked eye when you're going in there, because you can't go around the corner or look down at the foundation. So it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time, because everybody's in the same situation, but at the same time you're pricing it and you're trying to be competitive, and there's no way that you can really know or account for the unknown, and that is a problem. But I think that gentleman had a great idea of going out and doing the cameras. I think it was a very good idea.
Well, and I think you're seeing the drone technology come into play there as well, right? I mean, yeah. I think as drone technology gets better, it gets more detailed, it'll have an application from a technology standpoint in that construction world that, never was before. And the more finite that technology gets in terms of being able to see as well as, the naked eye, I think then then we'll start to see, that'll kind of really advance what that, what the field looks like more. How about any others? Teresa, anything you'd like to
Yes.
share with us?
Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Harris. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and this has been a great call. So to Dan, when you started Resurgent Collaborative, from idea to day one of business, how long was that? I know you brought all these organizations together, but how long? How long did it take to do that?
I'm going to say, I need to look at my calendar, but I'm going to say 5 to 6 weeks, but from idea, which was basically when I called Lawrence, to let's call it launch of the website, was probably 5 weeks. Lawrence and Rick, does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Sounds right, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's call it 5 weeks.
Okay, that's fast. It's really fast when you're bringing other leadership together to come to a consensus of how things are going to get done. That's fast, at least in my opinion.
It's fast. Yeah, and credit goes to everyone involved because they understood the opportunity, the challenge. No one ever put their hand up, said no, I can't do that. It's like, yep, what do you need? And got us what we needed, and it's been that way so far, and I hope it continues that way. But it's going to get challenging as everyone returns to work.
And then I think the other part of that is we all knew each other or knew the other part. So I know, the Rick City Meyer, I worked there for 11 years. I was a partner there, and they're a client of mine. You worked with Faruqi, right? And I'd already met Rick, and then Cheryl was added into the fold. We've already worked together on some combined stuff already. You and I go back a ways, and your wife as well. So there was 98% of a collective group that knew each other to some degree already. I think that helped as well.
Okay, thank you.
And Lawrence wouldn't have anything to do with me if it wasn't for my wife. So thanks to her. I probably owe all the credit to her. She just walked in, so I hope she heard that.
I want to make a comment for Dan. Great job to put this. I'm just so excited for you to hear you do the introduction. And like Teresa was saying, it's amazingly fast. And I also particularly want to mention that I am so glad to hear that you're working with some very big organizations about their strategy, about what is the new normal and what they should be letting their employee know what to do during this COVID-19 time. And I think as we start to see what happened last weekend, it is a little nerve-wracking to see how people could behave so irrationally, right? Like they feel like it might be okay, they just do things. So having, the big organization, people like you to give more guidance for people and do more, I would almost say, advocation for what is a safer thing to do, what is safe for you, your community, and everybody you might impact and involve is such a great idea. I'm just so happy that you are doing that kind of work. So plus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I have to keep in mind, so Lawrence and I are the ones kind of running the business, but really the experts, other than on the communication side for me, but the experts are really Rick, who's on the phone here. I mean, he and Dr. Cheryl Christensen together created P&G's first global flu pandemic plan. Is that right, Rick? Rick, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Dan?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you know how to, from practice and experience, how to advise companies, organizations, really of any size, on what steps to take, either now or how to adjust and probably project what steps they should take moving forward. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, we developed the plan probably about 6 years ago. Dr. Cheryl Christensen and myself were responsible for pulling that first plan together. And it was initially done when the bird flu was the hot topic at the time. But since then, we've had Ebola, MERS, SARS, and couple other things along the way. So it's been tested, but what we have today is really a very unique circumstance. I mean, we have a pathogen that can be highly, highly contagious in a way that we've not seen before. And the fact that it can be transmitted from one person to another when one person is either pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic, so no symptoms showing, is providing a real challenge for us. So I think the new normal is going to look very different than the old normal until we get a vaccine. And, you know, it will depend on whether that vaccine is going to be 100% proof positive for everybody too. So I think, you know, many of the changes that we're seeing now are going to be with us for a while.
Well, Rick, we really appreciate that perspective. And I think, you know, we are definitely in unprecedented times in so many ways right now. And we could definitely carry on this conversation. But I do want to wrap us up and thank Dan for joining us and sharing your story about your own company, Dan, and as well as the collaborative company that you've created, Resurgence Collaboration, with Lawrence and Rick. So really very much appreciate that. We will, well, we'll kind of end it here, but I want you to know that next week we're back here again, same bat time, same bat channel. I haven't used that one yet, so I've been waiting to talk again. And what we really just hope is to build a community of small business people who can come together and, you know, get to the next level and see how we can continue to support one another. So thank you very much for your time and for everybody joining us today. And so if anybody has last quick questions, I'll take one more. Dan, did you want to say something?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to make sure that people, yeah, I appreciate, thank you very much, Audra and John, for involving me and asking me to participate today. And I really enjoyed it. And thank you to Lawrence and Rick for joining. Certainly, if anyone has questions after this call about anything, just direct them either, you know, on the email thread that we've all been communicating on, or direct them to me, dan@o'keeffepr.com. That's O'Keefe with 2 F's, so OKEEFFEPR.com, or through the resurgentcollaborative.com website. Happy to answer whatever questions you might have. And I appreciate your interest and time.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Have a great Friday, and we look forward to seeing you here next week.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dan, thank you very much. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome, Audra. I really enjoyed it. So hopefully that I answered your questions and that was informative.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we wanted to keep it fluid. Hope you didn't feel too put on the spot about anything in particular that you felt like flustered about. We tried to, as we said, we keep it kind of loose and just kind of flow with where the conversation's going. So I thought that was great.
Good. I prefer it that way, and I think that's exactly how it was. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, well, great. And then if we hear from anyone on the call today who needs to get back in touch with you, we'll make sure we get them over to you.
Great.
You know, if we hear anything. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and you're hitting the road today. Is that what I hear? Is that what you said?
Yeah, my texting, they've all been texting saying 4:30. We'll see about that. Yeah. In the woods, no cell coverage, no Wi-Fi until sometime late Sunday. So.
Oh, very good. Well, enjoy. Have a great
Thank
time
you.
doing that.
You guys all
Alrighty.
stay well.
You too.
Take
We'll
care.
talk to you next